All right, let's get right into it. There's a really complex situation unfolding in the Middle East, and we need to talk about what's happening.
So, in just the last 24 hours, things have escalated. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has seized multiple cargo ships, and they've done it in one of the most critical waterways on the entire planet.
And here's the thing that makes this so confusing. Aren't the US and Iran supposed to be in a ceasefire? Well, yes, they are, and that's exactly what makes this whole situation so incredibly alarming.
Okay, let's really break this down. How did this fragile peace get shattered in just a matter of hours?
So here's what we know for sure right now. We're talking about 3 cargo ships being attacked by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. Now, 2 of those vessels, the MSC Francesca and the MSC Epaminondas, were actually seized. And their crews? They've been detained by Iran. All of this went down right there in the Strait of Hormuz.
But to really get why this is happening now, you have to look at the bigger picture. You have to understand the blockade and the ceasefire, these 2 conflicting policies that are really at the heart of all this tension.
In this timeline, wow, it really lays out the contradiction, doesn't it? The war kicks off at the end of February. Then, April 13th, the U.S. starts a naval blockade. But just a week later, on April 20th, President Trump extends a ceasefire. And then, boom, the very next day, Iran seizes the ships. It just goes to show you can't really have a punishing blockade and a ceasefire at the same time. It seems they just don't mix.
And you might be asking, okay, why does a narrow strait on the other side of the world matter so much? Well, here's why it matters to literally everyone. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most important oil choke point. A huge chunk of the planet's oil supplies passes right through it. So whoever controls this strait, well, they've got their hand on a vital artery of the entire global economy.
Okay, so that's the action on the water. Now let's get into the war of words, because, believe me, the stories coming from the 2 sides could not be more different.
So if you ask Iran, it's pretty simple. They see the U.S. naval blockade as a blatant violation of the ceasefire. Their chief negotiator, Mohammad Bagar Ghalibaf, put it plainly. He said it's just not possible to reopen the Strait of Hormuz while these violations are happening.
But then you turn to the White House, and they're drawing a really fine line here. The press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, was asked directly, does this violate the ceasefire? And her answer was a straight-up no. Her reasoning? These weren't American ships, they weren't Israeli ships. She basically called the Iranians a bunch of pirates, but said, technically, it doesn't break the ceasefire.
So you see the problem, right? We have a fundamental disagreement on what the word violation even means in this context. For Iran, the blockade is the violation, and seizing ships is their response. For the U.S., the blockade is totally legitimate, and the seizures are just piracy. When you're that far apart on the basic facts, where do you even begin to negotiate?
And just when you think it couldn't get any more complicated, well, it does. We're now getting completely conflicting reports from the ground.
So this all leads to a huge question. Is the U.S. blockade, the very thing at the center of this whole mess, is it even working? Well, according to the official story from the U.S. military, yes. They're painting a picture of total success, claiming the blockade has already forced 28 vessels to turn back.
But there's another side to this story. Independent analysis from BBC Verify, using actual ship tracking data, seems to show something different. They found that a number of Iranian-linked vessels have actually gotten through the blockade. That suggests it might not be the iron wall the Pentagon says it is.
So what does U.S. Central Command say to that? Well, they're doubling down, hard. They're calling those media reports inaccurate and insisting that no, those specific ships were intercepted. They're either anchored back in Iran or are literally being escorted by the U.S. Navy right now.
And right in the middle of all this chaos, this back and forth, a sudden departure from inside the Pentagon just adds a whole new level of uncertainty.
So I want you to remember this number, 2.
Why 2? Because the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, John C. Fillon, just left the administration, effectively immediately. And get this, he's the second high-ranking military official to leave this month. Think about that. The top civilian leader of the Navy quits right in the middle of a massive naval blockade. That raises some serious questions about what's going on with the command structure for this whole operation.
So what happens next? Where does all of this leave us? Well, frankly, in a pretty dangerous stalemate.
Let's just recap the situation on the ground right now. The peace talks that were supposed to happen in Pakistan, they haven't even started. The Strait of Hormuz, it's pretty much closed for business by Iran. The U.S. blockade, that's still going with no end in sight.
And maybe most importantly, the crews from those 2 seized cargo ships are still being held. So nobody's talking, a vital shipping lane is blocked, and real people's lives are hanging in the balance.
And that's the big question we're left with, isn't it? With no one talking and no real deadline here, is this ceasefire just the quiet before another, even bigger storm?